All right, and that's going to bring us on to white. So once again, we are going in mana value order, and we're starting with commons. We've got a common with a different name, but a lot of the same. Acrobatic Leap, single white mana for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+3 and gains flying until end of turn. You untap it.
So these always overperform.
Mm-hmm.
The difference in this set being this is not a permanent card. So it's if you're playing a deck that wants to trigger Descend or Descended, this is not going to do it. But if you're playing any aggro deck, specifically if you're playing green-white, like this boosts its power. So it's still gonna. I think this is still gonna be a good card in general.
Yeah, I think just this slot we've seen be good time after time. The worst it was the worst in Lord of the Rings, but it was still like a solid card there. And the other times we've seen it, it's just been awesome. So I'm gonna put faith in this as just a good combat trick. It's got a lot of qualities I like about combat tricks. 1 mana, good early, good late. I'll give it a solid C. C plus
Yeah, I
maybe.
was gonna write C as well. No,
Okay, C.
I'm gonna go C. I do think that white in this set in particular is pretty heavily split, like
Yeah,
almost down the middle between aggro and control.
agree.
I don't really want to play this in control, although it's not the worst. Like it's a good defensive trick potentially. Um, but I think there's going to be less decks that want this than usual, and I also think you're going to want to not start a draft with a white card as much, just
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know which way of that spectrum you're going to go.
Yeah, and this we'll see how we feel after we talk through all the white cards. But generally, the way it plays out when you've got split white cards controlling and aggressive cards, it actually kind of defaults to the controlling cards, where white becomes a controlling color because you need a density of good aggressive cards to have a good aggressive deck. Otherwise, you're like, well, I've got like 7 good aggressive white cards and 3 ones that are like destroy a tapped creature, and that's just not really good. Whereas if your white cards are the controlling white cards, you can cherry pick those and put that in like your blue white control deck. That's totally fine. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it does work fantastically well with the white green and white red signpost uncommons.
True.
So,
Yeah, definitely. We've got Deconstruction Hammer up next, another equipment. So it's a single white mana, equip 1. The equip creature gets +1/+1 and has 3 tap it. Tap the creature. Sacrifice the hammer, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So we've got kind of a short sword, 1 mana to play, 1 mana to equip, +1/+1. And then you can tap your creature to sack this hammer and kill an artifact. Or enchantment.
so I think this card is great.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I was hoping you'd say I'm glad you're on the same page as me, so we don't have to talk through this too much. But give me your thoughts. Why do you think the card is great?
Well, so 1 mana +1/+1 is already like decent. Like, again, white green, it boosts the power.
Yep.
White red, you can just like tap this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the equipment doesn't fall off if you tap it, so it's just a rectangle you can tap. White blue, it's an artifact for coming in. It kind of works in everything, and then that ability to destroy an artifact or enchantment. If I'm right about the games coming down to turns like 6 through 8 is just about crafting some huge artifact monster and hoping that's going to win you the game. This is like a super clean answer to those things.
Yeah, while being like the problem with just if this was just disenchant or naturalized, that could just get stuck in your hand. I'm sure you can cast it early, but it's not what you want. Like if the games play out in the way you're describing, you should save it for later. This one lets you do something as you're going, and like you mentioned, +1/+1 for 1 and equip 1 is a fine stat line for an equipment. So I'm into this one. Chat's asking, do you want multiples great? No, I don't think so. I think you're gonna play like 2 max. Would you disagree
Yeah,
with that?
yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with that.
But
I was going to give it like a C plus.
yeah, I was gonna go there too. C plus for Deconstruction Hammer. Cool. And just in general, naturalized effects are a little bit better in this set. It is an artifact set. All right, what do we have next?
Next is Miner's Guidewing. White for a 1/1 flying vigilance bird. When it dies, target creature you control explores.
Okay, so yeah, we got a lot of we got a 1 mana 1/1 flying vigilance. So we've got sort of a callback to various 1 mana 1/1 flyers, birds usually in the past. And they when I first saw this card, and this is part of the puzzle for me for the equipment, I put on my designer cap and I was like, all right, why this card in particular? Well, I think they almost wanted a what was the card from Call of Time? The Battlefield Raptor, right? They wanted a Battlefield Raptor to put equipment on because that was a successful formula in that set to make equipment actually work, just a cheap evasive creature. I think they wanted that, but not quite as good as Raptor because Raptor was really, really strong. And this is going to kind of play that same role. You're going to enhance it some way. You're going to put an equipment on it. And then when it dies, it's not always going to die. Sometimes it's going to get bounced, exiles, whatever. But maybe you chump block once in a while. Maybe they do have a deal 2 effect. You're going to get a little bit of value.
Yeah, there's not a kind of ton of stuff it trades with. Like, there's not a lot of X1s in the
Right.
set, which is a knock on it. But just having a 1/1 body extra that's lying around has shown to be like powerful. It just makes your block so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also, like, with the red white uncommon, you can attack with this and that thing, and then you can still tap it to trigger your discover.
Cute, yeah.
A lot of cute things going on with this, and I don't think I'm as high on it as some others who seem to think this is like one of the best commons in the set, but I have it as like a C plus.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna do too. Yeah, it's not having like lifelink or like we've seen versions with lifelink and first strike. And vigilance is definitely a worse ability on a 1/1 flyer than first strike or lifelink especially, but it's still solid. I would also go C plus for Miner's Guidewing.
Okay.
Next up, we've got an interesting one. Otaclan Landmarks. This is a single white mana for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you scry 2, and it's got craft with an artifact, so you can pay, and the mana cost is 2 and a white. The backside is Otaclan Levitator. It's a 1/4 flyer, artifact creature. When it attacks, target attacking creature without flying gains flying until end of turn.
Yeah, so it's almost all these craft cards are almost, again, like, you get the front side effect because I think they all have an ETB. I'm pretty sure they all do. And then you're also functionally drawing whatever the backside is with some extra hoops,
Yes.
right? Like, you need. So there's some upside and some downside there. I don't hate this card though. Like, scry 2 draw and like awkward 1/4 flyer is not too bad.
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth on this card. At first I was like, okay, I like this card. It's cheap. It's an artifact you're getting in the battlefield. The backside's pretty good. And then I went through like, well, is this what you really want to be putting your crafting material and your mana into? And then went back to the kind of like, if we're imagining the games in this set are, you got kind of just have trinkety things on the battlefield and eventually you do your thing. I've kind of come back up to, I kind of like this. And Scry 2 on turn 1 is actually pretty nice. Like, this lets you keep more hands is something that I think is really, we should highlight, because this just scrying 2 for 1 mana on a card that will turn to something later means that you can keep that 2 and sometimes 1 lander hand if your curve is low enough. So that's like an actual material advantage I would say that this card gives you. I do think this one plays out a little bit different than the other craft cards in that it's not like, well, you're building up to one big thing. I think this is mostly just like a card you're going to put in your aggressive decks and just flip it at some point. But maybe you feel slightly different. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Well, so scry in this set is particularly interesting because
Right.
you can set up both explore and discover.
Mm-hmm.
So even like later on, there's going to be spots where before you discover 4, you like scry 2 and kind of improve your chances of hitting something more interesting. So even later on, and then you can just bottom lands like in the super late game where you don't want to draw anyways. So this card's like, it's pretty decent on turn 1. It's pretty decent on turn late, whatever you want to call that. I was going to give it like a C minus. I don't think every deck wants it.
No, I agree with that too. I think it's just like a fine place to put some mana, put some crafting material, especially in a deck that's not crafting a bunch already. I guess that's kind of one of the things where you do have to think about, well, is my deck, how likely is it I'm going to flip any given craft card, given that that kind of dynamic we were talking about, where it's like, well, you're going to have 1 in your deck, or as the format plays out, we'll understand that you really want to be flipping this one. This might be relegated more to material rather than anything else. But I think this is less so going to be in a crafting deck and more just like in an aggro deck. Like, you're just fine playing this. And also worth noting, that backside, like 1/4 flyer jump something, like that's a good creature. That is, if you were to pay 3 mana for that, you'd be quite happy.
Yes.
Yeah. So C minus is that where we're landing?
Yeah, I think so. Like, yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
words about it, but I think it's better than a D is basically long way of saying that.
I think so too. Next up, we've got Attentive Sunscribe. This is 1 and a white for an artifact creature. It's a 2/2, and whenever it becomes tapped, you scry 1.
Yeah, a lot of these like gluey cards, right? Like, it's an artifact for blue-white. It's an attacker. It taps, in white-red it gets tapped and scries. So it's really interesting. The design team on this set probably had a lot of fun with this set because it's pretty interesting on how all the archetypes kind of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, it's not great. I'm not like I have this at probably like a C-ish type. Like I don't think this is the two drop that you want to have.
No, I don't think so too. And that probably means C minus then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. C minus is probably fair. Yeah.
yeah, I'll go C minus for attempt to subscribe as well. Next up we've got Cosmium Blast. This is 1 and a white for an instant. It deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. So this is definitely on the more controlling side of white here. You don't generally love putting these in your aggressive decks. Yes, you can kill a blocking creature, but they get 2 blocks still, and that's a big deal for your deck that wants to be dealing damage every single turn. You can play it there, but mostly a control-minded card.
Yeah, so it's basically blue white and white black maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just the question of how good this card is how often are you going to play those two decks? Because I do think you are more likely than not to play the first copy of this in like a blue white deck.
Right, yeah, I think so too. I would actually be... I would say I'd be pretty happy with multiple copies. Like, it's not quite as good, I think, as Kellen's Light Blades from the last set, because that just, like, straight up killed something if you wanted it to. But 4 damage is going to kill a lot of things. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I kind of want to give it a bit of a split grade, like a D in aggro decks and, like, a C plus in controlling decks.
Oh, I think we can just give it the control grade.
Sure,
And just,
yeah. Oh, we trust
I'm
our
gonna go
audience,
C,
yeah.
And then you'll say C plus.
Yeah, our audience, they know what's up.
Yeah.
All right, what's up next?
Next is Family Reunion. 1 and a white for an instant. You can either have your creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn, or have your creatures gain hexproof until end of turn.
Yeah, that's like an okay split of things. Neither of them are particularly good. Like 2 mana +1/+1 to your team, 2 mana hexproof to your team. I don't think this is like a bread and butter card you're just gonna play all the time. It reads to me more like a 23rd playable than anything.
So what do you want to give it then?
Like a D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's because D is worse than a 23rd card, right? Like
Sure,
you
yeah,
don't
that's true.
usually want to play a D.
Yeah, fair enough. So maybe even a D minus then. I just don't think this like really fits. Like it almost reads like a sideboard card because you're gonna want the hexproof a little more in some matchups. But I don't know. Not a card I'm very excited about.
Yeah. Okay.
Iron Paw Aspirant. This is one I am pretty excited about. 1 and a white for a 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature.
Yeah. So at its baseline, it's just a 2/3 for 2, which is already like pretty well statted. But another like it's a defensive stat, right? Like if the whole board's full of 2/3 creatures, like nobody's attacking each other.
Right.
So, but the fact that you can put a counter on your 1/1 flying vigilance is great. The fact that it has more power than its base power is great. You can give something basically +1/+1 at haste in the late game if you just top deck this and put the counter on something else. I like this card quite a bit.
Yeah, imagine just going this into the green-white uncommon that draws you a card when you hit. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Yeah, I'm going to go C+ for Iron Paw.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too.
Cool. All right, what do we have next?
Next we have Petrify. 1 and a white for an aura. It enchants an artifact or creature. The permanent can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated.
Yeah, there we go. Just like, I mean, we've had strictly better passive systems in the past, but this one, even more.
Yeah, there is like a whole mechanic around sacrificing. Like you can craft stuff away. You can sacrifice it to Bartolome. So there's you can bounce the creature that this is on. So this has a lot of downsides, but the fact that this set is low on removal means I do expect to play these.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. Yeah, there's for some reason we're gonna pause right here. I noticed this too. Did you turn up your volume at all?
No.
Okay, it's gone now, I think. Yeah, weird. I don't know. It was echoing quite a bit for when I was talking there, but now it seems to be fixed. So we will carry on. Yeah, hold on one second. Let me just make a little note. Strange. Okay. Yeah, I think where the good versions of these pacifisms or these arrests or the white enchantment based removal spell, I think the way that I framed them in the past little while is good in your aggressive deck, a little bit less good in your controlling deck, because you just in a controlling deck you're just giving your opponent more time to let them sacrifice it, let them bounce it, whatever it is. Longer the game, the shorter the game you're playing, the more you're bashing their face in, the less that matters. The less that a small 2-for-1 on their side will matter too. But I think it's still quite a. You're gonna take this card fairly. I know a lot of people are gonna take this really, really, really highly, but I think this is still gonna be, even for us who are a little bit lower on these aura-based removal spells, still gonna be a pretty high pick. So I would go B minus. I think on Petrify. You want to go C plus though? Maybe I don't know.
Yeah,
Closer to C
yeah.
plus. Yeah.
I was going between C and C plus, and I was going to give it a reluctant C plus,
Yeah.
but you can have your B minus.
I said B minus, then I was like, that doesn't sound right to me. So I will join you in C plus.
Okay.
Sometimes I just have to like say the grade, and then I'm like, oh no, that doesn't sound right at all.
Yeah, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't
Yeah,
sound
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Can't be saying that to our loyal listeners who are taking our words. All right. Next up we've got Thousand Moons Crackshot. 1 and a white for a 2/2. When it attacks, you can pay 2 and a white, and when you do, you tap target creature.
Yeah, nice upside. It does have to attack and not be tapped, which it's weird that they like didn't template it the same as the other one. But again, I don't think this is the two. Like, you're not going to want to activate it on turn 3. You're not going to want to activate it on turn 4. You're not going to want to activate it on turn 5. So what like when are you
Yeah.
activating this? Only really when it's giving you lethal. So I still don't think this is the 2-drop you want, and it doesn't, it doesn't block very well. So I probably have this as like a D.
Yeah, we're gonna, as we get through the rest of the set, we're definitely gonna get a better sense of this. But I do feel like that the 2-drops in this set, the common ones anyways, are not as pushed as they've been pushing them in the last little while. Like, they're a little bit less all in, like, gotta kill this right now. Obviously some of the good golden commons we've seen have been that, but the commons, I do like, I would bet that it was intentional. Like you said, they want you to be able to craft and do your thing. They want you to just die right away. So, and that's my read on this. So it's not so much below par of the other 2-drops that we've seen. It's not great. I'm gonna give it like a D plus, or maybe even just a D. But it's gonna make your deck sometimes.
Okay.
All right. What's up next?
Next is Envoy of Akanek Ahau. I think that's how you pronounce that. Ahau. 2 and a white for a 3/3 Cat Advisor, and you can pay 4 and a white to make a 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature token.
That is a very expensive ability, even if you're on like a stalled out board. Like, I read this, I'm like, okay, you're not actually activating this on turn 5 or turn 6 very often. But even when you are, kind of like, all right, we're going through this game, nobody's really making any headway. Is this the thing that's going to help you pull ahead? I mean, I guess if your opponent never draws anything, sure, but I don't love it.
No, me neither. Like, the size on it's not bad.
Yeah, it's fine.
This reads as like another like D plus to me.
Yeah, I was gonna go C minus. Just I think it's 3/3 will stop the 2/3s on turn 2, which is kind of nice. But next we got Glorifier of Suffering. This is 2 and a white for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice another artifact, sacrifice another creature or an artifact. And when you do, you put 2 plus. Oh, let me read this again. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So it comes in, sack an artifact or creature, put some 1/1 counters on up to 2 creatures.
Yeah, so this is another card. I've been closely paying attention to, the Discord, Twitter, other set reviewers. I've been trying to consume some content. And again, people seem really high on this card.
Yeah.
And I also kind of don't really get it.
I viewed this card as a 2/3 with kicker, that the kicker costs to sack something, not pay additional mana, in the sense that, like, you're not going to be doing it early very often. Sometimes you're going to have curves where, like, oh great, like, I have this 1-drop artifact that I got value out of already, and you do the thing, but it's not going to be like it every game comes down, put some counters on. Like, that's just not the play pattern with this card.
Yeah, like this, so you basically never want to just play this as a 3/2 for 3, right? Like, stockpiling Celebrants from WoW, the reason it was so good is often on turn 2 you had something fantastic to trigger with it already. So if you're playing this as a 3-drop, it means you have to have gone 1-drop, 2-drop, this, and have had both of those creatures survive, because you need to sack one of them and the other one gets, the second counter. And then your like big benefit of this is you've got a 4/3 for 3 and a creature where is bigger, but you've also like sacrificed a creature to do this. I don't know. I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, so the one little thing that I wonder if this is something they're going to continue in sets, but they in Wilds of Eldraine, the archetypes, the draft archetypes were they lined up with the stories. Like, Green Red was Little Red Riding Hood, and Blue White was Frozen or whatever the original is called. And they it's kind of a way for drafters or limited players to be like, oh, okay, I see where this card goes just by looking at like the art of the theming. And I think that's kind of what they're doing here with making it a vampire. Like, I think this is a black white card because that's the deck that has the most sacrifice fodder. That's the most deck you care about sacrificing the most. If you do have all the cheap little things in that deck, but it's not a card that you are going to play in just any white deck happily, I don't think.
Yeah, and like the decks that have things that you're happy to sacrifice are not the same decks where you're like aggressively trying to beat people down and need the counters,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you think the deck that wants this is an aggressive deck because it's like a 4/3 for 3 that pushes damage and or it puts 2 counters on some other creatures that are going to push through damage. But then like what are you sacrificing at that point?
Yeah, and there are a few things like we can go through the like if we wanted to go really deep on this card, we can go through the set, pick out a few things like yes, that's actually really good with Glorifier. It's a great curve. It's just not gonna happen every game, and I don't think you should expect as such. So I'm gonna start this as like a C, respecting the fact that it is gonna be pretty good in some decks, but
Yeah,
temper it though.
yeah. That's why I mentioned it because I think C is what I'm going to land on as well. And it might have sounded like I was going to give it a lower grade, but
Mm-hmm.
I was just kind of tempering based on other content creators seemingly being much higher on this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people in chat for what it's worth that also seem higher on it than we are, and we'll see how this plays out. There's gonna be one of my little like earmarked cards to on early access in a few days. One I'm gonna be interested in, but we'll see. Next up, we've got Thousand Moons Infantry. This is 2 and a black for a 2/4. When it says untap Thousand Moons Infantry during each other player's untap step. All right, cool.
Yeah, so the cute thing with this is either red white tapping or also crewing vehicles,
Right, yeah,
right? Or it just has vigilance basically. So
yeah,
there's some upside there.
definitely. But it just screams super filler to me, right? Like this is like a D minus.
Yeah, I was gonna give it a D.
Okay, cool. What do we have next? Here's one. You want some material? Want some cardboard? Here's some cardboard.
Yeah, Tinker's Tote, 2 and a white for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, create 2/1/1 gnome artifact creature tokens, and you can pay white and sacrifice the tote to gain 3 life.
Really like this one. This is 3 artifacts, 3 pieces of material, 2 creatures on 1 card. We know that's good. And even though it's not, you're paying a little bit more than you would expect for the power and toughness, but that's made up by the fact that it has a lot of synergy. Gaining 3 life later is nice. Being able to trigger both your descending things and care about crafting. I don't know. I really like this card.
Yeah, this card is good. I think maybe like green white, like aggro doesn't want this, but
Mm,
probably every other white deck does.
yeah.
Um, so it's going to be a fairly high pick for that reason, and I don't think you're cutting these like I don't know, like a B
Ever.
minus.
Yeah, I was gonna say B minus. I think you're never cutting these from most white decks unless you're doing some really weird specific thing, and you're actively gonna be seeking for it a lot of the time. So yeah, I like B minus. Next up, we've got Adaptive Gem Guard. This is 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 3/3 artifact creature. Tap 2 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control. Put a +1/+1 counter on Adaptive Gem Guard. Activate only as a sorcery. So we've seen time and time again these they start understated. They promise that at some point they'll grow. They always underperform. Now I wonder in this set where it is maybe going to be a touch slower. I don't want to predict too much here. It might not play out that way. There might be a little bit of room for this kind of card, but I just cannot see myself being excited about this card.
So I'm going to ask you your grade before I say anything.
Yeah, I was going to give this a D.
A D. Okay. So I think like out of all the cards like this we've seen, tapping creatures for this is obviously like horrible. Like you don't want to tap creatures as a sorcery.
Yeah.
But there's pretty likely scenarios where you have 2 artifacts, like
Mm-hmm.
whether it's equipment or whether it's like craft cards or whether it's the tote we just saw. And if even with just 2 artifacts, like this is immediately a 4/4 and then potentially grows to like a 6/6 or a 7/7 next turn. In a set where there's not a ton of removal, I can kind of see it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I said activate only as a sorcery, but chat's repeating it, so I wanted to, just in case I didn't say that, you can only activate this as a sorcery. Yeah, like that's the thing. I can too, and that's why I kind of like gave a rider on that. Like maybe it's there. I also see that world. Right? I can envision it. I just like don't. I can't in good faith say right now that our hunch will be correct. You know, so I'm gonna start low on that. Another
Okay.
one I'm gonna earmark, but I just not I don't know. I think this is gonna be a little bit too clunky still.
I'm gonna go C minus,
Okay,
and
yeah, I like it.
2 grades different,
No,
and,
no,
and
we've been
yeah.
pretty in lockstep, so it's good that we have a big difference here.
Well, this is already the third one we've got. So yeah, we have a few disagreements here and there.
Next up, we've got Altec Cloud Guard. This is 3 and a white for a 3/2 flyer. And when it enters the battlefield, it comes a little 1/1 colorless gnome artifact token.
Card is great.
Yep. Just checks all the boxes of things we've come to know are good about these kind of cards. It comes with 2 bodies. It's relatively well statted. One of them has a keyword. Not, I think, worse than Chimney Rabble. I think that haste is a little bit better. Haste and being a 3/3 is a little bit better than the flying 3/2, but still a great card. I would give the Cloud Guard a B minus.
I think I'm just gonna go B.
Just a B? Yeah. All right, sure. I like it.
I I really like this thing. Like the fact that it makes an artifact, it makes 2 bodies. Flying is just great ability. This just shows how insane Preening Champion was. Like,
Yeah, exactly. We're paying a whole extra mana for another power here, right?
yeah,
So you're gonna go B on this one?
yeah.
Okay.
On the Cloud Guard, yeah.
Yeah, I will keep my B minus, but I would not be surprised if you're wrong, or wouldn't be surprised if you're right.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, a little Freudian
I'll
slip
never
there.
be surprised if
You
you're
know what?
wrong,
I wouldn't
Mark.
be that surprised. Mark's been wrong before, but all right. What do we have next here?
Okay, next is Alltech Archaeologist. 4 and a white for a 4/4. When it enters for a human scout, if it matters, I don't think the creature types matter unless it's one of the 4 from the previous time we were in Ixalan. But when it enters the battlefield, you can either return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand, or you can scry 3.
I kind of like this one. I kind
Yeah,
of
I do
think.
too. This kind of reminds me of that Kaldheim card.
Oh,
Like
Master Skull.
Master Scald.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I played a bunch of Master Scalds in Kaldheim.
Yeah, I think like, and this is probably going to be even better because there are more artifacts in this set than there were enchantments in Call Time. That being said, you were picky about when you played Master Scald. You were like, okay, I have Showdown with the Scald or some good Saga or something. But I think it almost maybe is a wash at that point because you're just going to play this card in most of your decks and not be too picky about it. Scry 3 is a nice little bio.
Another more control-y card.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you don't want to play this in your aggro decks, but Scry 3 is very powerful on a 5-drop, and being able to potentially draw a card with selection is great as well.
Imagine just like playing that tote on turn 3, sacrificing it, playing another 3-drop or something. Turn 5, you get it back. Like you feel really good about that.
Yeah, totally agree. I was going to put that, like, again, the caveat, you don't want this in aggro. We're not giving the grade as if it's an aggro card.
Yeah.
But like a control C+.
Yeah, I like C+ for the archaeologists. All right. Next up, we've got Quicksand Whirlpools. This is 5 and a white for an instant. Exile target creature. That's the rules text here. And it costs 3 less, so only 3 mana, if it targets a tapped creature.
Yeah, so we've already seen a card that deals 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature.
Mm-hmm.
And soon we're going to see an uncommon that deals 5 damage to a tapped creature.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of control tools for white. Like I do think that the default white deck is going to be a control card, and that's part of the reason why I'm so excited to draft like blue white and white black, because I think it grinds pretty well.
Yeah, I think so too. And I also think that like that's probably why they gave red white like not like a purely I'm attacking you, killing you mechanic, because they just knew it wasn't going to line up very well. Like the white cards weren't going to play that well with the red cards. So yeah, I agree with all that. This card in particular is fine. Like it's expel plus if you want to give a strict save in comparison. Like a C?
Well, more I see this more like as a fierce retribution from Val.
Sure. Yeah, that's a little bit better. C plus C in a controlling deck. What do you think?
I'll give it a C.
Yeah, sure. C for Quicksand Whirlpool. Next up, we've got Soaring Sandwing. So this is 4 white for a 3/5 flyer. 6 mana for a 3/5. ETBs, you gain 3 life and has plane cycling for 2 mana. So this is part of a cycle. Every color gets one of these big expensive things that have cycling for their basic land type.
Yeah, so between Merchant Machine and Lord of the Rings, we really starkly saw the difference between land cycling for 1 mana or 2 mana.
It's huge.
Uh, huge cost to the second mana. So these are not going to be as, especially in white, where it's a color where this is a way to trigger Descend or Descended. You don't need that as much in white.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the body on this is decent. Like I
Yeah.
almost think you pay 1 mana more on the cycling option, and what does it look like if you assume that it's 1 mana more on the creature side too? And like a 5 mana 3/5 flyer gain 3 is we saw IFA Negotiator
Mm-hmm.
from the last set. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's like a you don't make them lose 3, but you gain 3. Yeah, I think the card's fine. Like I'm not excited by it, but I'm not like, oh man, like that you're putting this clunker in your deck. Again, I don't think you're ever gonna like search out this card, being like, really hope I have a Sandwing. But yeah, I'd give like a I don't know C minus D plus level card.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah,
C minus is what I was going to put as well.
sounds good. All right, it's going to move us to our white uncommons here. First one being Dusk Rose Reliquary. Really sweet art on this one. Single white mana for an artifact. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you sacrifice an artifact or creature. And when it enters the battlefield, exile target artifact opponent controls. Or sorry, artifact or creature opponent controls until the Reliquary leaves the battlefield. And it's got Ward 2.
Yeah, so kind of like a Bone Splinters-ish card.
Mark loves his Bone Splinters. He like really big fan. No, Mark is notably not a fan of things that make you sacrifice as additional cost.
Yeah, I'm probably lower on this. Like, this is. Do you think this is worse or better than Bone Splinters?
I think probably better. I think being an artifact, it's a little bit weird though, because like you don't want to be sacking this at all. Like, this is a really bad thing to sack. So maybe being an artifact just like doesn't have enough of an upside, and it is just worse. It probably is worse, and especially in the context of this set where there are some amount of naturalizes running around.
You can. The upside is that you can tap it, right? Like you can.
Sure.
It's an object you can tap to
Yeah.
whatever to your 3/3 that's going to grow into a 12/12. It's
Yeah.
yeah. I think based on your answer, it's roughly the same, and I'm going to grade it as if it's roughly the same as a Bone Splinters.
And you'd give Bone Splinters like a D, right? Like D plus.
No, it's yeah. Well, yeah. Like yeah. I'm probably going to give this. Realistically, for set review purposes, I'll give it a C minus, but I'm going to play it less than that.
Right, yeah. I was just going to give it a C. I think Bone Splinters is... And I guess that probably is my answer then, because I'd give Bone Splinters like a C minus, and I think this is like slightly better, and that makes sense because you're like half a gradation off of that. So, yeah. Not a fantastic card is what it comes down to. Just a fine one. Next up, we've got Helping Hand. Single white mana for sorcery. Return target creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So Unearth is backed. The card, not the mechanic.
No, but it's tapped, Alex.
It's tapped.
It hurts me so much that this is tapped.
No,
I think it'd be really good if it was untapped.
Yeah, tapped is actually like a big downside. It might not read like a big downside, but yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty the first time I read this, I didn't get that it was tapped, and I was like pretty excited about it, and then it really brought me down on it that it comes in tapped.
Yeah. And the thing is about these cards that they're a little bit better as the game goes on, because in your opening hand it's not going to be great. You can have some good double spell turns on turn 3 where you're like, trade off my 2-drop. If your opponent chooses to trade off, get it back, play a 2-drop. That's pretty good, but that's like fairly narrow. And then as the game goes on, you get more selection of what to get back, but at that point getting back a 3-drop isn't all that impactful. So I think this card is just not very good for limited purposes. Like, it's more of a constructed card. You're like getting back something very specific. I'm gonna go like D minus on this. Maybe you have like an abundance of good 3s to get back, but
it's pretty good with the we're gonna see the 4/4 flyer for 2 mana soon.
Yeah.
It's quite good with that card specifically. So I think if you have a couple of those, you play this. But also like you want to some of the stuff in your graveyard you're gonna want to exile to craft. So you might not even have a great target for this.
True.
I was gonna give this like a D plus on the assumption that you're almost like a build around C minus maybe.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. There's we've seen these kind of cards: Return Triumphant, Recommission. I mean, this isn't exactly the same, of course, but I definitely had some decks. Like I've done deck techs for Wilds of Eldraine where I was like, wow, this is actually a really good Return Triumphant deck, because you've got like a Werefox Bodyguard and a good rare and 2 ashes. Like I'm sure there are going to be situations where like, oh, this is where you should play Helping Hand. It's just not a generically good card you throw in every deck though.
So what do you want to give it?
I was gonna,
You
yeah,
said
I'll join you. I'll go D+ for helping
okay.
hand. What do we have next?
Next, we have Market Gnome. White for a 0/3 gnome. When it dies, you gain 1 life and draw a card. And when it's exiled from the battlefield where you're activating a craft ability, you gain 1 life and draw a card.
Yeah, they really didn't want your opponents to feel bad about Swords to Plowsharing this, I suppose. Like, really specific rider on this. Oh, when you're crafting. So this is a very, very narrow card, but a good one. A good narrow card. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think if you're like crafting,
Yeah.
you're pretty happy to play
Yeah,
this.
I didn't want to give you the. What deck do you think this would good play well in, Mark? Yeah, it's a little. I think our audience can piece that together. And if you are blue-white crafting, or I'm sure other, there's not just going to be blue-white where you have you craft. Some decks you're just going to kind of backdoor into having a lot of craft cards. It's going to be fine there. More of a control card than not. And we've been saying that a lot, but of course we've mostly seen the white cards, which are that. I think that if you probably don't want to take this highly. People are going to pass this to you. But it's a little nice little treat for the people that are crafting and get this like 7th or 8th pick or something.
Yeah, and you can sacrifice it, although I still do think that you're not like happy. Like people always just say, "Oh, this is great to sacrifice," but you're never like happy just throwing away an 0/3 is my like counterpoint to that. But yeah, it's fine to sacrifice. It still triggers, so decent amount of synergy with some of the various abilities throughout the set.
It's like Synergy C+, maybe C.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I'm just gonna give it a C. Like I think there's gonna be a lot of decks that goes in.
Yeah, fair enough. Next I've got Ruin Lurker Bat. So a lot of 1-drops in white here at Uncommon. It's a 1-mana 1/1 flying lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, scry 1.
Yeah, so this flying lifelink is great with equipment. It's good with if you can put a map and put like a counter on it that way through exploring. So there's ways to grow this, and like a 2/2 flying lifelink is great.
Yeah, if you can augment this by 1, you're doing it, right? Like that's kind of the thing. And the thing is, I was kind of piecing together how often are you going to be descending, and my current stance on it is you're not going to do it every single turn, but you're going to do it more turns than not, right? If you want to be able to do that, and maybe you have to like disrupt your natural play pattern, your curve a little bit for getting a really good descend bonus, but you can do it if you want to. So if you think of it this is like you play on turn 1, it gives you 4 scries over the course of the game. I don't know. I think this card's quite strong with both lines of text being great.
So what, like a C+? I was
gonna
go higher than that.
Yeah, I was gonna go B- for the Ruin Lurker.
Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna go C+?
Yep.
Cool. All right, next up we've got Clay Fried Bricks. 1 and a white for an artifact. It says when Clay Fried Bricks enters the battlefield, search
fired, not fried. Not fried. It's fired.
Oh, fired! Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I read that completely wrong. The English word. Classic Alex getting the English word wrong. All right. Clay Fried Bricks. When Clay Fried Bricks enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic Plains card. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. You gain 2 life. Okay, so that's the front side. Also has craft with artifact. 5 white. Backside is Cosmium Kiln. So this is an artifact. Enters the battlefield. You make 2 1/1 gnome tokens, and your creatures get +1/+1.
So it doesn't fix. It's kind of like that Sentinel from Neon Dynasty, the Sunblade Sentinel or whatever it's called, where you gain 2 life, get a Plains, but instead of having the optionality, you kind of get both with this. So I think this is still pretty good.
Yeah, I got to interrupt this, deep strategic analysis to point out that I once again said it wrong as I was reading the card. So you didn't hear me wrong. You didn't hear me wrong. I'm just gonna call out from now on. Anyways, sorry. Start again, Mark. I don't want to interrupt you. What did you say?
I said it kind of reminds me of Sunblade Sentinel or whatever it was called from Neon Dynasty, where you could plane cycle it and gain 2. But this one,
sure, yeah.
You do need the white first to get the second plane, so it doesn't fix you whatsoever. But you get both abilities. Like you get the front side and you get the craft this later to make what is actually like a pretty good backside to this. Like an anthem with 2 bodies on it is pretty solid.
Yeah, I think it's comparable to the blue-white golden common we saw, where it's a fine thing early. I mean, that one was a 5-mana 4/4, a little bit different, but I could see this in the running for this is the thing you want to be crafting, right? This is the thing you want to be actually putting your material into. I think that the front side's interesting because I was thinking of it sort of like a man. What's that card called? It's the saga from Theros, Birth of Meletus. The 2 mana, you get an 0/4 wall, you gain 2, you find a plains. It's a little bit different than that. Like that card, you were just very happy to cast on turn 2. This one, I think you're probably not going to be casting until like you're just going to play it when you have 2 mana, or if you really need to hit that 3rd land drop, which is fine still because the backside is quite strong. Yeah, I think the card is good, but I'm not exactly sure the magnitude of that, right? Like what's I'd be interested in your grade first.
I wrote down B minus for this.
B minus. Okay, that's higher than I was gonna say. I was just gonna give it a C plus, but you feel like it's like your artifact controlling decks are just gonna love this card.
Yeah, like you need mana, right? And this kind of gives you, it spots you a land for your curving out, and it gains you the life. So like being behind on tempo a bit, it's kind of spotting you a little bit of that already.
Yeah.
And then I just think the threat of like it's basically draw 2 cards for 2 mana.
Yeah.
And gain 2 life, right? Like draw plains, draw a 7-drop, and gain 2 life.
Yeah. All right. You know what? Yeah, I will join you. I honestly I just like wasn't even 100% sure. Like this is when I was looking at the cards this morning. This is the one where I was like, yeah, I'm curious to hear what Mark has to say because I don't have a great read on it. Yeah, I'll join you though. I'll join you at B minus for clay fried bricks. Those delicious clay fried bricks. All right, what do we have next?
Next we have Dauntless Dismantler. 1 and a white for a 1/4. Artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped, and pay XX white and sacrifice Dauntless Dismantler to destroy each artifact with mana value X.
Okay, so initially kind of reads like a constructed card, but I think it's not that bad. Like it's a 2 mana 1/4. It's a good defensive body. Your opponent's artifacts entering tap will matter sometimes, either for the time you're like you're like, okay, I can get an attack here, or you are trying to maybe there is like an activated ability. And that sack it to destroy an artifact. Like it is a lot of mana. XX is not that easy, right? You're paying 5 mana, to kill a 2-cost artifact, or multiple if they have them. But your opponent's gonna have to play kind of trickily, interestingly versus this, because it's like, well, I want to play all of my 2-drop artifacts, but I kind of need them to crack this first or kill it. So it's a very annoying card to play against if you have any amount of artifacts.
Yeah, and that number you mentioned, like 2-drop artifacts, there's like a ton of those.
Yeah.
So just being like the threat of just being able to, this is one of the few things you can do in this set at instant speed, and being able to instant speed threaten just destroying a board of like treasures, tokens, and maps, or destroying a board of 2-drop artifacts. I think the ability is quite powerful.
Yeah, and worth noting that this does not destroy the backside of Craft, I don't believe, because the backside of Craft is not 0. It's still the same as the front side, so just don't get caught up in that.
Right.
Yeah, the more I look at it, the more I like it. I kind of want to give this like, I'm gonna go C plus on it. Do you feel?
Yeah, that's where I was as well.
All right, cool.
Another card you don't want to play in aggro. Like you might have noticed that we keep saying this is a ton of them. But yeah.
Yeah, white is just not a very good aggressive color. I would say maybe there's you can cherry pick some here and there, but like I mentioned, you kind of need that density. Next up, we've got Guardian of the Great Door. This is white for a 4/4 flyer. This is as an additional cost to cast this spell. Tap 4 untapped artifacts, creatures, and/or lands you control.
Yeah, so it's basically got Convoke and Improvise.
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's great with the 1 mana return thing, the recover that we just saw, or the whatever it's called.
Yeah, Helping Hand.
With Helping Hand, but even without that, I think like it's also good with the 3 mana, the Tote, make 2 1/1s, like that spots 3 permanents for this.
Oh, it also. No, sorry, go ahead. I have an interesting point.
I think it's quite solid, and then I was going to pass it back to you.
Yeah, I was going to say it also kind of, not that like you can plan for this that much, but it plays well with Discover, right? Like it's a cheap thing that you cascade into, and it's like, all right, I hit my 2, but it's actually a 4/4 flyer. Yeah.
But you still need to.
That's true. Yeah, you still need to pay the additional cost. Yeah, you can't just do the thing.
You're still casting it, so if you don't have 4 untapped things, you can just put that card in your hand. But the ability, even just drawing a 4/4 flyer off of Discover 2 is still going to be really good sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like this one. This is a card. So there was the card from Brothers War, the Warlords Elite. It's a 3-mana 4/4 that had this ability to tap 2 artifacts or creatures. It's sort of the same, but a little bit different. It was really relying on you having ones, right? You really wanted to have one so you could power that thing out on turn 3. This is kind of going to be a similar thing. Not necessarily that you need to have ones, although it does help. But the more permanence you have on the battlefield that you're planning to play on 1, 2, and 3, like the more spell heavy you are, the much like just gets way worse, and it gets way better if you have the 1s and the 2s. So just something to think about. C plus?
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to go C plus for this.
Great. What do we have next? Ooh, this is a fun one.
Next is Spring-Loaded Saw Blades. 1 and a white for an artifact with flash. When it ETBs, you deal 5 to a tapped creature an opponent controls, and you can craft with an artifact for 3 and a white. All craft is a sorcery, so just to make that clear, they're always going to be sorcery speed. And it turns into a 5/5 vehicle with crew 1, but you can also tap 2 other untapped artifacts to turn it into an artifact creature.
Whew. Yeah, so we've got a good controlling removal spell on the front. 5 damage is a lot. And a good vehicle on the back, like 5/5 crew 1. You could also, tap your little trinkety artifact instead of creating your creatures. Yeah, I think it's just a premium uncommon.
Yeah, I was going to go B plus on this.
Yep, I was going to go the same. Yeah, B plus for Spring-Loaded Saw Blades. Great. Next up we've got...
And another great control card. We'll stick that on repeat.
Yes, another great control card.
Yeah.
Vanguard of the Rose is up next. 1 and a white for a 3/1. The Vampire Knights. 1 mana to sacrifice another creature or artifact. Vanguard of the Rose gains indestructible until end of turn, and tap it.
We've seen a lot of cards like this, and they're always great.
Yeah.
Like just the threat of activation is worth more than anything else. So I assume this is going to be similar. Probably a B type of card.
Yeah, I'm a little bit... I was actually going to go a little bit lower on it, because a lot of the versions we've seen of this have no mana for activating, right? So there's just like not a window for your opponent to be like, okay, I shocked that thing. Where this one, they have that window. You play it on turn 2, they can kill it. Being able to sack another artifact is definitely an upgrade. And I think even if you're not, let's just say you're not a super aggressive white deck, like we're saying white might not be, this is still like, it's not an aggro card necessarily. It's just a good card because you can do it on blocks too. No problem with that. I was just gonna go C plus on it, but I might be a little bit too low on it. I guess it also does your descend stuff for what it counts. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That 1 mana is a big thing for me. But
didn't we see a card like this in Phyrexia Albi 1 where it had a oil counter on it, and then you could pay 1 and remove an oil counter?
Yeah.
And that card was still great.
Yeah, that card was still good. You're right. Okay, no. I will join you. Yeah, I will join you at the you gave it just a straight B.
I mean, you can go B minus if you want.
No. I think after talking through it and like all the little small things with like triggering your descent if that matters and artifacts over creatures, I'm on board. B for Vanguard. Okay, so we got our first cave payoff here. Bat Colony. Yeah. So we got, it's a 3.
The second cave payoff. There's also the one you can turn into a 3/3 if you have 4 caves.
Yeah, that's true. So this is 2 and a white for an enchantment. When it ETBs, you create a 1/1 bat for each cave spent to cast it. So only 3, unless you can somehow make it more extensive. 3 at max. And whenever a cave enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control.
Yeah, it frustrates me so much that you need a white producing cave.
Right, yeah. Huh.
Like, there's barely any in there, right? So, like, you can't... Just having 3 caves isn't enough. You need one of them to be a white producing cave.
How happy are you if, like... Okay, let's just imagine a good cave deck. You've got, I don't know, 8 caves? How happy are you if this just makes...
I think you need a minimum of 8 caves for a cave deck.
Okay, let's go 10 then for the deck you actually really got there and you were able to not spend a lot of early picks on caves because they were just coming to you. How happy are you if this is just your draw lines up a little bit poorly, you're making a 1/1 on turn 3, and then you put counters on some stuff as the game goes on?
Not very happy.
No.
Like making 3 bats is great. Making 2 bats is decent. Making 1 bat is bad.
Right.
For me.
Yeah, 2 is really what you're aiming for, and to have for this on turn 3 to have 2 caves in your opening hand, and mind you, untap ones too, even in a heavy cave deck, it's not going to happen every single time.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to cast this on turn 3, but that's still an opportunity cost thing where you could cast it and you're not. I'm a little bit. It reads like a good card, but then when I think about how it actually plays out, I'm less enthused.
Yeah, grades on all the cave cards is going to be weird because like cards like this are going to be so good in the cave deck if it comes together, but there's just going to be so many train wreck drafts that end up with like
Yeah.
5 caves or whatever, and like I've picked a bunch of these that the grade is again the conversation's worth more. I'm gonna give it, I don't know, like a D plus, but like, the grade means nothing to me.
Yeah, I was gonna give it a C. It's a bit of a cop out C, but definitely agree. And I think that one thing is that the cave deck, knowing what makes a good cave deck is it's a lot of things. You really have to balance a lot of things. Where you're taking the caves and drafts, where you're taking just making a functional deck outside of the cave stuff too, like making sure you just have enough interaction. Your curve's good. Like it's a lot of things to balance. And yeah, like we mentioned before, we're a little bit tepid on it, but we'll see where it goes. Next up, we've got Kinjali's Dawnrunner. 2 and a white for a 1/1 double strike. When it enters the battlefield, it explores.
Yeah, that's what you want to see on a double striker. It's either a 2/2 double strike that surveils 1, or it's a 1/1 double strike, draw a card.
Yeah, I like this card a lot. Both those cards you just described are great. There is a good amount of ways to augment your cards in the set, like we mentioned. If you get this like to 2 power at all, it's good. 3 power past that, even better. So yeah, I think it's just a quality card.
I want to give this like B minus.
Yep, exactly where I was going to go to. And this is just a good card in any deck. It doesn't have to be aggressive or controlling. It's just a good card.
Yeah, like 2/2 double strike for 3. We've seen before. They're not like amazing, but they're good.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah. Next up, we've got Might of the Ancestors. 2 and a white for an enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains Vigilance until end of turn.
Are you comfortable just giving this a quick F?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's one of those things where I give a bit of pause to it, being like, I mean, it could be a little bit better than I think it is, but my initial read is just not particularly good. Yeah, I just don't like. Okay, so here's let me just talk it out a little bit. Basically, you would want this card as a way to push damage in your aggressive decks, and we're gonna ignore the layer of maybe white's not that aggressive. But the idea here is like, okay, I can turn all my things into a threat slowly. Problem with that though is sometimes the issue in your aggressive deck that you can't get in isn't that they have big blockers. It's that like your cheap creatures are going to trade off if you attack into theirs, and this doesn't solve the problem. You don't want your cheap creatures to trade into theirs. You want them to be able to attack past them, and this doesn't help you do that. So like in half of the game states that you're expecting your aggro deck to be like stalled or can't get in, this still isn't good. So I don't know. I think like even comboing it with like the flyers to push a little more damage, I don't know. I'm not so into it. So
are you comfortable giving it a long F?
I'm gonna give it a D minus just because there's a little shimmer of hope in my eye that this has a place, but I do not think that it's gonna come to fruition.
Okay, yeah, I know we're still in white. A lot of color. I think we could have skipped a few words on this one, but I agree it's bad.
sorry about that. What's up next?
No, not criticizing it at all. But...
Yeah, what do we have next?
Next is Mischievous Pup. 2 and a white for a 3/1 with flash. It enters the battlefield. You can return up to 1 other target permanent you control to its owner's hand.
Little stockpiling celebrant variant, if you want to think about it that way.
But like, so much better, right?
Yeah, flash is big. Being able to pick up something like a flash changes the like what functionally what the card does. Right now, it's like actually saving something. And of course, picking up your artifacts that the saw blades deal 5. Like imagine that you just cast a removal spell, pick this up. Yeah,
there's so many cheap ETBs in this set. Like, right, so many.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason this is uncommon. I think this is definitely a card that would be very annoying to play against at common.
Yeah, well, what do you want to give this? I'll let you go first.
I was gonna give it a B minus.
B minus?
Yeah.
I was between B and B plus.
Oh wow, that high, eh? Okay, yeah.
I think I'm just gonna give it a B. But
all right.
Like, I wanted to mention that I think it's close to a B plus.
Yeah,
I think this card's so good.
I will keep the B minus, but I could definitely see you being right. All right, last white uncommon here, Malamet Warscribe. 3 white for a 4/3. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn.
Yeah, tricky one for me to evaluate. Like overrun on a body, we don't. I can't remember a lot of those.
No, we don't really get them that, but we get +1/+1 a lot of the time.
Hmm. But +2 is like we have a card that makes 2 tokens.
Yep,
There's
it's an upgrade.
bodies there. I I'm gonna let you take the floor on this one. I honestly have no clue what to give this.
Yeah, this was one that took me a while to kind of think about it too. So I think that even in a non-aggressive deck, this is still a fine effect. Like you're not, of course, it gets better if you were like if you're playing the token deck from like Dominaria United. Obviously, this card would be fantastic, amazing. We're not quite in that world, I don't think. But even still, just like +2/+1 to the team is a good effect. Like, of course, you want to be not controlling. You need to have a higher creature count in your deck. I don't think it's a like. There's some people in chat are like, oh, Mythic Uncommon A-. I don't think it's quite there. I think it's a quality card though. I would give it like a B- probably.
Okay, I'm just gonna blindly. I disagree with you that I will play this in non-aggro decks, but I will blindly agree with your grade because I honestly have no idea.
So when I say non-aggro decks, I just mean like not control. And you disagree with that? You're saying like you need to be aggressive to want this card?
I think so.
Okay. Fair enough, yeah. All right, so that's white. What do you think about white as a color?
Well, we see. So the 4 pairs with white are like green white having more power, blue white artifact control, black white sacrifice, and red white having a lot of stuff in play. And there's not a ton of overlap between those. And so we kind of saw in the card file half the cards are aggro, half the cards are control. That can always lead to like pretty awkward situations in the draft where you start off your first like 4 picks are all like green white aggro cards, and then you just keep getting past, the saw blades and the deal 4 to an attacking creature. So there's some awkwardness to white, but personally, I think the control side looks a little better, and there's enough power in each side that I think that it's a good support color.
Yes, I think that's where I would land too. I would also say that dynamic of, you start drafting some, the aggro white cards, and you're not getting past them. It kind of cuts both ways because there are going to be drafts where it's like, well, my neighbor opened a white bomb, but they're passing me the controlling white cards. So I don't really care that much that I'm drafting next to somebody that's also drafting white. I think it is more of a downside than an upside. It cuts both ways unevenly, but just something to mention.